Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the fifth talk of our Planted on Earth series at this year's flagship launch event here at Granary Square, King's Cross. My name's Sam Peters and I'm one of the co-founders of Planted, the first contemporary design event aimed at reconnecting people and spaces with nature. At Planted, we want to make the commercial case for nature by working only with partners and brands and businesses who place the environment and nature at the heart of everything they do. We're also committed to changing the way the events industry is run by attempting to drive down waste in build, breakdown and production, by asking all our exhibitors to ensure their stands can be reused, repurposed and recycled after the event. All Planted signage is made from 100% waste plastic, courtesy of our friends at Stormboard, as we strive to become the first zero waste design event. For the time being, our minimum commitment is to send zero waste to landfill while publishing all our metrics around energy consumption, waste and carbon footprint, I should say. And today I'm delighted to welcome a panel of experts who are committed to finding solutions to the myriad problems facing the design world and the industry more broadly. On my far left, Nick Stillwell, a pioneering scientist and leader in the world of recycling and waste management, and founder of Stormboard, a remarkable company who are responsible for creating this amazing Planted signage we see behind us, made from 100% waste plastic, which includes toothbrushes, cigarette butts, and crisp packets. Sarah Ratty, the founder and CEO of award-winning eco-fashion brand Seal. Sarah is a sustainable fashion consultant and self-proclaimed green guru for lifestyle and fashion for a changing world. Patrick Speck, the head designer at Grower, a leading bathroom and kitchen supplier who are committed to transformative change to protect our planet. I'm looking forward to hearing about some of the projects Grower are working on to reduce waste, especially around water. And lastly, but by no means least, Andy Flynn, one of the founders of an innovative design brand, Potter Pots, who use cutting-edge technology to transform 1 million metric tons of waste plastic, much of it harvested from the ocean, to create eco-friendly, self-watering plant pots. And I must add a special thanks to Andy, who's been given precisely 6 hours notice before kindly agreeing to take part in this talk. So welcome, Andy, and thank you. Really looking forward to hearing about what you guys are doing. So perhaps where we should start with the problem. Specifically, not you specifically, Nick, no, but the problem of waste and waste plastic. And also what can be done. I know that's a huge problem, huge question, but what is the problem we face here with waste, and specifically waste plastic, but we'll obviously go on to talk about other waste streams.
So let's start with the definition. You guys go out and you do your recycling, you put it in the bins and all that sort of thing, and you think your product has now been recycled. The definition of recycling in this country and the rest of Europe is it's collected. Yeah, it's picked up. That doesn't mean anything's done with it. It doesn't mean that anyone's going to make anything out of it. What happens is the best products get sold. So we're very good with metals, we're good with wood and standard contemporary items. But as soon as it gets to plastics, we've got a real problem because plastics are bonded together in various multi-layer films. So the first thing is, does recycling mean recycling? No, recycling means it's either going to be incinerated or dumped on Turkey. That's your general rule. Or any other country that'll accept it. So when we recycle plastics, it includes exporting them. A lot of it goes to Europe to be burnt. And we do a fair bit of burning ourselves. So once you've got past that, you look at the plastics and you say, okay, what can we make out of this? And it's almost impossible to pull the plastics apart. There is recycling routes for most post-industrial plastics. That's stuff that's come off the production lines. And there are routes for single layer film. So when you've got one plastic, a polypropylene or a polyethylene or a PET, there are routes to recycle those, and they can be. But when it comes to packaging, I'm married to a packaging designer, so she makes it, I get rid of it. Once you start to incorporate layers of UV protection and all this sort of thing to create these multi-layer packets, you can't recycle that through the normal route. But on the other side, there's no such thing as unrecyclable plastic. Give me any plastic and I will make something new out of it, even if it's attached to a piece of wood or a cigarette or whatever. The problem is we don't do it. So we need to be able to collect these plastics, make them into something, and then sell that product, whatever it may be. And that's where the biggest thing is. The circular economy. So if someone comes to me and says, oh, I'll give you all my plastic, which they all love to do, I'll say, okay, what do you want it back as? And they go, oh, we don't want it back. I say, well, circular economy is a circle, yeah? So if you produce waste, you've got to take it back. And they go, no, we just give it to you and you make something nice out of it and sell it on the market. I say, no, that's not how it works. That's not a circle, that's linear. And, you know, I've seen lots of reports on butterfly economies and this economy and that economy. If you're going to produce a waste material, you've got to take it back. So if everything that comes out of my factory, I will take back, even if it's got vinyls or whatever stuck to it, like these signs here, and I will make it into another product and put it back into the market. So it is possible, but we've got to get the big polluters to start reusing their own waste rather than say, oh no, we'll get something nice from over here and we'll bring it back in. So that's a good start.
Very good start, thank you, Nick. Could you come to you, Sarah, if I may?
Yeah, sure.
You're coming at things very much from the area of fashion. How have you seen the fashion industry change and evolve, and what are the big issues facing fashion from your perspective?
Hello, can everybody hear me? Oh, good. Yeah, so pretty much what you're saying, but the main problem really is the same problem that's been existing for a very long time, which is that our country does not have recycling plants. This is the biggest opportunity for anybody out there who's interested in the future, making recycling plants in the UK. So basically people don't want our shit anymore. They don't want it. So we have to deal with it right here, right now. Now, in the fashion industry, I've been working in green fashion since the noughties, and I've done everything from post-consumer waste, working with Oxfam Waste Savers, got my work in the V&A Museum with items made from recycled Aran knitwear, because I noticed that in our country, we knit a lot of Aran knitwear. So I thought, right, okay, we can do that. And then as I morphed on my journey, I went into using recycled polymers, and the most recent exhibition at the V&A for Fashion from Nature showcased one of my pieces where I did this in the 90s, and it was all using recycled plastics. So we can make a virgin material out of recycled plastic. It can be chipped, and it can be brought back and put back into the loop, which I think is what you're talking about, but putting it back into the loop. And that's what's really important. But what's happened so far is it's all been pushed onto the consumer. And what actually needs to happen is that governments need to actually start taking some responsibility, stop pushing it on the consumer, and start making some actual commitment to building plant in the UK and throughout the whole of Europe. That, I think, is the single most important thing that we could all do. I hope that helps.
That's excellent, Sarah. Thank you so much. And Sarah, that's a fascinating take to hear from you that recycling plants don't exist in the UK. We're definitely going to come back to that. And Nick, I'd also be interested to hear your take on that.
I'm sorry, we just don't have enough of them. That's
Enough
the
of them.
situation. And as we know, we've seen Hugh Whittingville do his investigations, and we've seen it, you know, as like plastic that's turned up from plants that are being recycling in Wales, and it's turned up in Thailand. And it's like, and there's like all work on, looking at microplastics in the ocean. There is something very interesting which everybody could do right here, right now, is buy themselves a guppy bag. Now, a guppy bag is a really, really useful piece of kit. Basically, it's like a microfilter bag, and you can put all your washing in that might have micropolyesters, and then that will take the liniment out. They're not expensive. It's like an investment, it's like 20 quid. And that would really make a difference. The other thing that we will need to do is encourage washing machine companies to put on filters onto their systems and to retrofit. That also would be a very good solution.
Thanks, Sarah. Patrick, if I could come to you, grower, obviously you've been involved in design and designing bathrooms and kitchens for a really, really long time. How have you seen that industry evolve, and how are designers thinking evolving in this space?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks. First of all, thanks for I think the invitation here to be part of the panel. I think the subject that here we're talking today is again it's something extremely important. And I think us, as we mentioned before, as designers, I think the responsibility is big, right? So we are actually giving birth to products that are going to be utilized by the consumers in the end of the day. I think the main point is, and we could see the shift also and also in design in our generations, right? So I think working for Groa, we do have definitely sustainability is one of the pillars of the brand, which means at the moment that we are started sketching a product, it's already part of the discussions that we are having with the teams. So how is this product going to be packed? How is this product going to? So what is the footprint, for example, that we are going to have on this? One I would say simple example as what we did in the past was, for example, with a hand shower. So a hand shower. So we redesigned a product that had kind of a quite big box. The packaging was quite big. So we said, you know what? Can we optimize that? Like just to try to not compromise the performance of it, but we could try to do it flat pack. We managed to kind of diminish the angle of the product and kind of making some tricks there that we managed to kind of make it quite flat. And with that, we optimized the amount of cardboard that we were using for that. We also managed to make that more efficient so we could kind of ship more into a pallet. So that was kind of back in the day, more than 10 years ago, that we kind of start having that sort of initiative. Still talking about packaging, that one of the initiatives that we do at Groa was something about single-use plastic, the single-use plastic bags within the packaging. There was a research that we did internally, and we used to have 35 million plastic bags in the packaging, and that was just something crazy. When we got the number, we said, like, we need to start banning that from it, and we managed to reduce already 32 million. So we are almost kind of hitting the target to eliminate that completely from our package, because everything was packed inside of a plastic bag, and again, being I think with that sort of a mindset, ideas can come from every single quarter in the organization. We saw also in our factories, because that's the way also we stimulate everyone that's part of the process. In one of our factories, our operators, they have also great ideas to take out the plastic bags, but utilize actually the actual container of one of the products to carry, I would say, components that in the past used to be packed in a single plastic bag. So again, small things like that kind of will be representing, I think, a huge impact in the end of the day. But that only happens because I think the sustainability is embedded in the DNA of the company. So like it's cascaded from top down. So we already have that sort of consciousness.
Thanks, Patrick. It's fascinating to hear how the experiences you've had, and I mean, quite amazing to hear that 35 million plastic bags were once there. And I think it's also really important to make the point here as we move through this conversation that we probably didn't realise plastic was such a problem. Could you just, before I come to Andy Flynn, and I think is going to give a really interesting take on this as well, what is the scientific problem with plastic? And also, what are the benefits of it? I mean, it's such a universal product now, but what are we so concerned of when it comes to plastic?
I think there are two points. There's also, I think, there's the two sides, right? And it will be also interesting to see the other panelists' takes on this, right? From a design perspective, so the plastic was like when we started kind of shaping things out of plastic, that it was quite a fascinating thing, right? And in fact, a long-lasting product made out of plastic. So again, that's not the evil, right? I wouldn't paint it in that way. So at least from a designer's perspective, right? I think the fact of kind of utilizing that as a single use, that this is where the real problem is sometimes. And I see this is as a big point, because if you were making something durable, something that's going to be long-lasting, right? I think you can minimize the problem. In fact, one of one of the things that we did recently with our products is about creating what we call a cradle-to-cradle certification into it, right? We have recently won the gold nomination and the gold award for the cradle-to-cradle for 4 of our best-selling lines, which means so we need to. I think is a huge impact that's going to bring into the industry. But again, that's the point regarding the material health and also the responsibility after the end of the life cycle of a product, or for you capturing that back and kind of giving that a second use, a second utilization. I think, as Nick was mentioning on the very beginning here. So I think this is like one of the takes that I wanted to say is again, there's the two sides, right? There's not the evil kind of only about that, but also the way that you're going to handle responsibly. And I think this is one of I think more my take into it as a designer, right?
Thanks, Patrick. And I guess also going back to Nick's point as well, this idea of how we make plastic a circular material that, if you can bring it back into the system, and that's what we were so taken by when we first heard what Nick was able to do at Stormboard, was that this will go away after the event. It'll be put in storage. It's a durable material, as you described. It doesn't have perhaps the perfect corporate colour, which I want to really go into later. There are some blemishes in this, and I'd encourage everyone to come and actually check out our signage, which is a line I thought I'd never say a few years ago. But it really is a fascinating material, and you can actually see what's gone into it. Nick, I'm right in saying there are, as I said at the top, there's some toothbrushes, there'll be some cigarette butts in there, presumably, possibly some crisp packets, who knows, but stuff that most people would consider stuff that was destined for landfill, but there is an opportunity to reclaim it and actually make new products and keep going and keep reusing. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And I will come to you soon, Andy. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So cigarette butts are plastic, so you can use them. They do smell a bit when you process them, but we can deal with that. Yeah. So the material is made out of completely mixed waste, and you can see we often get asked for white. And you can't get white in recycle, believe it or not. That's why it's called a virgin plastic. So it's an interesting thing. You want a perfect plastic. If it's truly recycled, you ain't going to get it. You ain't going to get perfectly clear recycled plastics either. And that's where the corporate identity comes in, because a lot of companies want this perfectly clear pop bottle. They want this perfectly white. And if it's truly recycled, that's not going to happen, because if you look in the bins here, that's the stuff I use to make this material. If you imagine getting all your paints together, you mix it all up, what colour do you get? You don't get white, yeah? You don't get a RAL colour, you don't get a Pantone colour. So maybe we need to change our expectations if we want to reuse a material.
Thanks, Nick. Just pass the mic to Andy.
Okay. Can I just interject there at one point? Also, interestingly, what you pointed out, we were going to say about recycled and, the recycled polymers that we use. It's really important to think that we are closing the loop with these, putting it back into the system. And there's one other really interesting product which is now being made, and the point that you were making, and I had a conversation with the curator at the V&A, and we were having this conversation. We were saying, plastic needs to be rephrased as a slow product. If we can think of it as a slow material, not a fast material, we've kind of got it the wrong way around. So we need to think of it as and we also need to, as designers, create products for disassembly. And that's something that, as fashion designers, we've started doing that, and I would encourage this industry to also go the same route. And I think that what you were saying is what you guys have been doing, and I think that's really important, that we think of plastic as a slow material, i.e. it's something that is valuable and it will last.
Thank you. Andy Flynn from Potter
Hello.
Pots. Thanks very much again for joining us. Deb's one of the other co-founders of Planted, just so you guys know. We met Andy only yesterday, and we were wandering around our lovely botanical market, which I'd encourage you all to go and have a look around when you get a moment after this talk. And we were just really taken by Andy's story, and I'm going to let Andy tell his story, because it's a really cool one. And I think personally I I'm a very keen swimmer, and I go spend a lot of time around the sea, and it's certainly something I've noticed over the years has been an increase in plastic waste in and around the ocean, and it's something that brands like Finisterre are looking at now, and Surfers Against Sewage, and it's a serious problem. Those of you who've seen Seaspiracy, another really interesting take on what's going on in the oceans at the moment. But Andy, could you just tell us a little bit about why you set up Potter Pots and what your background is?
Absolutely. So hi everyone, I'm Andy Flynn. I guess I'm coming at this from a bit of a different perspective. I'm a product designer. I've been working in industry for the last 8 years or so. I've kind of seen everything from the good, the bad and the ugly in terms of production and producing products. So we founded Potter Pots. Here's one here that I made earlier. So these, we actually started our business during COVID, which was a really difficult time, and actually only just properly launched our brand in July this year. So it's our first physical appearance in any kind of market, which has been really exciting. I guess the whole premise behind redesigning the humble plant pot, bit of a random one to pick, some people might kind of think, but really we were trying to redesign a product almost as an example by putting kind of sustainability at the core of the redesign. So essentially what you can see here is the plant pot itself is actually comes flat packs, and this is actually really, really key to helping reducing the overall carbon footprint of our products, which is really interesting. So what we've tried to do is essentially take a very holistic approach. So obviously, on the one hand, there's recycling, using recycled materials, which is what we do. As Sam was alluding to there, our latest launch is actually made from recycled fishing nets, which we source from around Europe and around UK. This material is reprocessed, broken down, and extruded into sheet forms, which we then die cut into our origami planters. It's obviously laid up on a flat sheet. We cut several of these in one kind of swift motion, and then these are sent out to the customers in an envelope directly through your letterbox. So it's a very kind of holistic approach to the solution, if you like.
Plant pots in an envelope.
Plant pots in an envelope,
Love
and they self-water your plants as well as an added bonus. So
self-watering plant pots through the post. What more could you want? I mean, I think it's a brilliant idea, brilliant concept, and a really great example from Planted's perspective about brilliant design solving problems. I'd highly encourage you all to go and check out.
Yeah, we're just around the corner at Green Rooms Market. We've got the founders over here. So yeah, please do come round and have a look. But I think one important point I wanted to make was essentially as a designer, I think there's a real responsibility. You were alluding to this a minute ago. Designers and engineers really have that responsibility to be creating products and inventing products, really taking a kind of ground-up holistic approach to the design. So I've seen lots of examples through the years of designing a product, and then afterwards they go, okay, how do we make this sustainable? Let's kind of throw a recycled material at it, and all of a sudden, job done. That isn't the approach we should be taking. The first insight that we had kind of gained, which led to the design that we have, was that transportation and supply chain is a huge part of the problem. So if you imagine transporting a traditional ceramic or concrete plant pot that's 22 centimetres in diameter, weighs about 2.5 kilos, produced in the Far East, shipped to the UK, then shipped to your door via courier, you miss the delivery, takes a couple of runs, it really, really adds up. So what we're doing is, not only are we manufacturing here, but as I said, it's posted flat pack, you don't miss a delivery, so it's a much more holistic approach. When we identified that, it was then about, okay, what recycled material sources can we tap into to make our product from? So that's how we came across fishing nets, and that fulfills the requirements that we need to make our plant pots. So, yeah. That's
brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Thanks for telling your story. Really appreciate it. Nick, if I may just go back to you, and then I'd like to come back to Patrick afterwards, if I may. But Nick, this idea of corporate identity and kind of why is that sort of, what resistance have you seen in that area to people taking product which perhaps is otherwise, people would say that's a perfectly usable, durable product, but it doesn't quite look right?
So a prime example, if you walk around London, you'll see lots of hoarding. So there's a site hoarding, wherever they're building something, there's this big load of panels up in front of you. So we thought, well, we can replace those plywood panels with a panel made of the rubbish that's in these bins over here. So that's what we do. We make these panels, 8x4 panels, same size. Now, because of the colour, ours, we add a little bit of dye to get them either greenish or blackish, because, you know, you can't make brown white. So we've got this little project going on called HS2. And we said, guys, you know, I tell you what, we'll take all your waste and we'll make all your hoardings. And when you're finished at this point, you just pick it up and put it down at the next point. And I go, do you think we could actually sell a single board for the 7 miles of hoarding they've got round Euston Station? No, not one. It's the wrong colour. Because what they do is they chop down a forest in Asia. They transport it halfway around the world, paint it. Then they go and get dye bond, you know, that horrible, unrecyclable, plastic printed stuff. They screw it onto the wood. And then once they're done 2 years later, they landfill a lot. Because it's not pretty enough. And it doesn't fit the look, the corporate identity. It's not white, it's not perfect black, it's not perfect green, it's not a RAL colour. I had a sports company call me up and say, oh yeah, we want all these colours. And they said, can you measure between the dots on your board to see how far they are? I go, guys, seriously, who do you think I am? Every single board will be slightly different because the waste is slightly, though we create formulas, slightly different. And that's one of our biggest barriers, is this corporate look that we have to get through. And essentially the other biggest barrier is, as long as they can just say, well, actually, we just go and buy carbon credits, they're never going to change. Because they're sort of buying their way to heaven by saying, hey, we're carbon neutral anyway, because we bought all these carbon credits from this bloke over here, and therefore, why should we change? Get some more concrete in, come on.
Sarah, I mean, from a fashion perspective, and aesthetic is clearly something that we all look for, and we all see this idea, the corporate colour, the corporate identity. It's something we're conditioned to in many ways, but this is a lot about the consumer actually thinking for themselves a bit here as well, isn't it? And then demanding some change and recognising that there's a different way of interpreting beauty.
Yeah, I think one of the key things here, and what I've heard from my takeaway from what you've just said, is that I think it's a call to action for designers, really, to stop their whole endless search for perfection and to understand from a holistic point of view that, you know, a homeopathic dosage affects the cure. So I would say homeopathic design is really important. My first brand, Conscious Earthwear, I chose the word conscious because I wanted to continually have to keep myself on track. And it wasn't always easy. It was so many other choices I could have made. But because I had that word in my branding, I had to keep myself on track. And I think this search for perfection endlessly is something that we all need to look at within ourselves. And it makes everybody very upset, really. So frankly, as designers, I think having heard what your situation is, then we need to embrace that, don't we? So like, hey, you know what? We've got some really cool brown packaging. It's going to look really great. Let's use this. And I think that's something that designers really need to incorporate and make it cool. And one of the things that I set out to do when I created Conscious Earthwear was to make it cool to be green. That was my sort of core value, and I hope I did something towards that.
Thank you, Sarah. Patrick, a call to arms for designers. Is that how you see this? What are the challenges for someone who's obviously working within a really established organisation to affect that change and deliver that call?
Yeah, I think both points here. I think what Nick and Sarah just mentioned are definitely, you know, things that are. It's more like the change of behavior or sometimes the mindset, because we always, it's almost like it's in our DNA that we need to thrive to find the perfect shape. We need to find, for example, especially in our case here, we do like this, like, again, durable goods, long-lasting goods. So a faucet, a tap, well, it needs to be perfectly polished. It needs to be kind of a shiny into a certain kind of perfection, right? This is one side of the coin. The other is that I think think step by step, we need to kind of also somehow to celebrate that, or I would say kind of the rawness sometimes of the material, that kind of we need to bring sometimes kind of a less post-productions into it. We could see a shift in the last, I would say, kind of 3 years, and we can see a lot, because on top of doing the products, we are also responsible to creating the brand environments, to creating the showrooms and all the aesthetics. And then of course we are constantly utilizing materials and suppliers of interior design and everything. So we saw a material that in the past no one really took into consideration. That was the terrazzo, right? The terrazzo, no one liked that in the past, and all of a sudden, everyone kind of start embracing terrazzo, and we are starting incorporating that into it. And again, that's like it used to be kind of a cheap way to emulate granite, right? It is like the stone, it used to be very cheap, and right now is being brought into again, even like in high-end brands showrooms, you kind of you walk into it and you see the terrazzo being embraced, and we have done also that into some of our showrooms and our vignettes as well, bringing that into it is exactly like that, celebrating the imperfection, something that you can actually kind of use in this particular case. Another example is also how can we bring, for example, new technologies. We have again launched a while ago a 3D printed metal faucet. So this is what we did, but it's an amazing process that again is sustainable in the fact that we are using less water and less material throughout the whole process. If you compare one faucet in full brass and what we managed to achieve with the same product out of the metal 3D printer, we reduced 55% of the material. But it brings a certain kind of a rawness and roughness into it. So it isn't like the super uber polished, perfect surface that they were looking for, although it's a very precise, I would say, sort of a technology, but also you somehow are bringing something to the market that is almost like celebrating that sort of, I would say, imperfections in terms of the surface, right? But I think we can do that.
I love that line about celebrating imperfections. I think, we obviously Planted is set up to celebrate nature and try and see the beauty in nature, and this living plant wall that we're sat in front of, it's perfect in many ways, but it's perfect in its imperfection, because it's just it's not about clean lines. It's not
absolutely.
It's so much going on, and I think that's a really lovely take. I mean, Andy, you're a younger man than me, certainly. I'm guessing
maybe a few years, maybe
a few years. But I'm really interested from a sort of younger generation here. How are you viewing this issue around designing product that perhaps isn't absolutely perfect in its aesthetic, or perhaps as we would previously have considered to be perfect?
Well, it's quite interesting from our side, since we've actually started our brand Potter. I would actually say that a large majority of the customers that we speak to are wanting to celebrate that imperfection. And I don't know if that's just a younger generational thing, or that the word is kind of slowly starting to seep out that perfect products aren't actually perfect. We want to absolutely celebrate that imperfection. To go back to our kind of fishing net pots, the color of that is derived from the source fishing net, and you quite often have flow lines that you can see through the kind of extrusion process. And actually, that's the kind of thing that our customers are picking up on and are getting really excited about. So yeah, we 100% do not want to have the kind of polished article. So I think it feels to me like there is a kind of shifting kind of tide of perception towards this kind of thing, and one that we're absolutely going to try and push. So.
Thanks very much. Sarah, if I could ask you touched at the top of the conversation, I think, around what has to happen at a political level, and we were talking about the absolute lack of recycling plants, or sufficient amount of recycling plants around the UK. I mean, politically, what needs to change in order to really start to recycle and put more circular systems in place?
I think really we need some legislation to enforce recycling. I think that a lot of the initiatives that our current government have done, which is basically to push it onto companies, big companies, to take responsibility themselves without actually making any investment themselves, but they're quite happy to give money to other areas, perhaps like that are unnecessary. Without going totally political, I do think that that is something that really needs to change, and it's been needing to change for a long time. And our government, this year we have had lots of conferences, European conferences that are in the UK, and they really do need to step up and make change happen. Thank you. Also, just to step back onto some of the things that you were just saying, like the concept of wabi-sabi, you probably heard about that, perfectly imperfect, and another Japanese one which is called kintsugai. You've probably heard of that, which is where they take something and then they mend it with gold and they add extra value. I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at something and making change happen and valuing it and adding extra value. And I think we can look at other cultures and see how we can bring that in. Interestingly, you touched on terrazzo, and terrazzo, my niece is a architect, and she was telling me that terrazzo is actually an ancient Roman material, and they did it back in Roman times. And there's a lot of things that we can look back to. At school, I studied English, and I had to do Our Mutual Friend, which was a book with Charles Dickens, and he was talking about the dust mountains, and they used to have all these. They separate everything out, and add value, and actually have perceived value in these products rather than thinking of it as a complete throwaway, useless thing. And I think we have to reframe our design conversations, reframe our mindsets, and start to understand that everything has value. One of the really interesting things with being in fashion and then coming into this industry, one of my friends, she's working with this thing, it's called Worn Again Technologies. I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically it's looking at creating a solution, literally a physical solution, that you drop into a product base for recycling, and it splits out the fibres. So it's looking at splitting cotton from polyester, and it's like a major revolution, and this is something that's going to really change the story. And I think that we have to keep evolving and innovating, and I think that's really important, that we do all of these things simultaneously, not just one thing. It's a sort of layered effect. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you, very helpful. Thank you, Sarah. Pat, you've just come to you in terms of that sort of idea around legislation and things. But what are the challenges that face big organisations around? Do you feel that the pressure is often put onto you guys and the responsibility? And where does the responsibility lie? Is it all in the manufacturer? Is it in the consumer? Is it at government level?
I think being take more into, I think, being a global company, again, a massive corporation, also being part of a big group like our mother company, Lixo Group, that again is Japanese. By the way, we were just talking about the wabi-sabi, like all that. It's something that is already embedded into what we're talking about. But I think the principle needs to be, of course, as an industry, as a manufacturer. And so we need to take responsibility also from our side. And I think is the whole thing about kind of a leading also by example. And I think we need to put at the moment that you start kind of acting and not only talking about it, you also start inspiring other companies that they can do the same. And I think it was the same thing for us that in April of 2020, so all of our factories at Grohe, we managed to achieve carbon neutrality. That was again a big thing happening into the industry, being the first in the industry in the field of the sanitary field. So all the factories that we had it there, again talking about using renewable energy, green energy. So everything that happens into that that was again a big step moving forward. So that also inspired the other I would say companies within our group, because at the beginning of this year, so all the factories from the Lixo Group also achieved that sort of a carbon neutrality. So this is just one example of being someone that you were in a leadership position. So I think that responsibility needs to be taken by ourselves in one case, without kind of getting into just to kind of putting responsibility in someone else's hands. So we are accountable for it, right? So we do that. We are bringing products into the market. So I think that from the corporate level, and also, as I mentioned before, so starting and having initiatives, and at the moment that you were developing a new product that is going to kind of have a 10, 15 years of a lifespan, so it needs to be taken into consideration as well. So how this product is going to end the life, as I mentioned before, the accreditation of, again, again, a cradle-to-cradle product, so it was our first step into it, right? The journey is like, we cannot aim to kind of get everything in one shot. It's like, it needs to be taken step by step in several acts that we are doing. I think this is what I would like to expand more in this area.
Thanks, Patrick. I think that's a really good point about leadership and showing intent. I think is obviously really important. Something Planted is definitely looking to do here. We're talking about the events industry and the amount of waste. And Deb's, my wife, set up Design Junction, which some people here will have been to many years ago. And I always said it looked like a kind of theatre production in a way, because it looked absolutely beautiful at the front of house, but you peer behind the curtain and it was kind of carnage, and the amount of stuff that would just routinely be sent to landfill was utterly horrifying. And we've committed to sending zero waste to landfill, but we've found enormous challenges, frankly, in trying to understand waste streams and waste processes, and it is a complex world. And even though we're constantly asking our contractors to come and not wrap everything up in polythene and stuff that's going to go for landfill, there are really ingrained practices here which are going to take time to change, and I think there's some real leadership being shown by everyone on this panel, if I may say so. Andy, if I come to you, you just specifically around the sea plastic issue, can you just give a little bit of a view of what that problem is, what's going on in the oceans that we're not perhaps aware of at the moment, what drew you to working in that space? And then I'd also like to ask Nick a little bit more around Sarah's point around recycling and what's coming down the track in terms of waste.
Okay, so I guess first of all, what drew me to this problem? So I guess going back a little bit, I'm originally from west coast of Scotland. I grew up, I'm quite a passionate surfer in my spare time, a little bit like yourself, Sam. I spent a lot of time in the ocean and the seas. So when I started this brand and had the opportunity to do something myself, this almost seemed like quite an obvious problem to tackle, because I've seen firsthand the kind of pollution that ends up in beaches, the pollution that ends up in the sea. And I think one of the really, really interesting facts that we came across was that actually 11% of all waste plastic in the ocean actually comes from discarded fishing gear. So, you know, everyone's very well aware of single-use plastics, straws, all these kind of things, which obviously are a problem as well, but they actually, when you add them up, they don't account for as big a percentage of the plastic in our oceans compared to fishing gear. So this is really what drew us to try and find a kind of partner to try and come up with our part of the solution, to try and, I guess, siphon off that before it reaches the ocean, before it reaches landfill, and create, you know, a beautiful new product from it. So.
And can I ask you where you actually source where do you go and get recycled fishing gear? Oh, sorry, waste fishing gear. Where is it? How do you get it?
Yeah, so we're working with currently two, I guess, material recyclers who recycle this material. Our first trial production run is actually the materials collected by a company in Denmark called Plastics with an X. And they essentially are one of the biggest recyclers of fishing nets in Europe. And that's they're taking the nets from around the seas, around the UK and around Europe. And that material is then processed by a manufacturer here in the UK and extruded into sheet profile before we then turn it into our pots. So, yeah.
It's really cool stuff. Thanks, Andy. Nick, if I could just ask you, what is coming down the track? I mean, you in terms of sort of the problem for the UK, you talked, I think, at the start about a lot of our waste has historically gone to places like Turkey. We've historically exported our waste, haven't we? I mean, because I remember listening to something George Monbiot was talking about, the Guardian environmental journalist, talking about when we throw something away, what is away? Where does it go?
Well, there's two areas of problem. So just to go quickly back to the corporate identity thing, a lot of the waste we receive is never been used. So, and we're not talking about the odd bottle, we're talking about 20 truckloads of cosmetics which are 5 millilitres too short. But because they're 5 millilitres too short, they can't be given away, sold to someone else. They're all disposed of. And this is a huge problem, and that actually needs to stop. So if it's 5 millilitres too little, then pro rata sell it less, but that reduces the brand value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to think about what is a brand, you know, in a different way. And I'm not a marketing guy, I'm a waste guy. So you need to ask these guys that one. So we get this stuff. It's always dirty. So that's your problem. So as soon as you put shampoo in a shampoo bottle, it's contaminated. It's landfill. Yeah. That's it. You know, you're not going to make a beautiful, pristine white. Hey, here's a new shampoo bottle made of. No, that's not true. It doesn't happen. Yeah, question it. So we take the shampoo out. We put it into an AD plant, that's an anaerobic digestion, we create energy out of it. If there's food waste in there, we take the food waste out and we either compost it or we use it for anaerobic digestion. If it's a plain food, meat, that sort of thing, we can use hydrolysis to turn it into fish bait. And then what's left is plastic rubbish, the multi-layer horrible stuff that you can't get rid of. And that's where we make the plastic panels out of it. But what's coming down the line is how do we collect this, get rid of it, and get it back into society as another product, as a bench, as a raised bed, as a hoarding, as kitchen,
Planted signage,
all that sort of thing. So how do we get that? Well, the point is, you guys have got to buy it. If you don't buy it, I can't sell it, and therefore it'll end up in landfill again, or or another country. So essentially, to an extent, the consumers has got to say, yeah, we want this other stuff. We don't want to chop down a forest here. We don't want to mine this stuff in China. We want to reuse the problem materials we've got piles of here and make stuff with it. It's a long way off. Until we can change the way big corporations have to work, i.e., if there's no alternative, then you can use a virgin material sort of thing. And then is that fair? I don't know. But we've got to reuse all these products. Right now, the waste is still being exported, and that's called recycling.
Thanks, Nick. That's fascinating. And I would really encourage everyone, if you do have time today, you're here at Planted, the first contemporary design event aimed at reconnecting people and spaces with nature. But please do not only check out our Sleeping in Nature installation over there, but also go round to our Cable Street Natural Living marquee, where you'll find some brands who are really pushing the boundary here in terms of product design. We've really tried to curate the brands that are in there, and we've asked all the brands that we work and partner with, including everyone on this panel, a series of sustainability questions. But actually what's really fascinating for me personally is just the amount of now previously considered waste product which is now being turned into usable and beautiful product now, and that process is going on. And I think Nick's point about the consumer having a responsibility here, and get back to Patrick's point about embracing those imperfections as well, and in fact all the panelists have gone there as well. But Sarah, for the future of the fashion industry, again, just where do you see fashion going when it comes to addressing issues around waste in the future?
Well, I think fashion has been an early adopter in many respects and has kind of like flown the flag to publicise how we can make change. There's quite a lot of new projects which are all about lending libraries, things like that, which are really, like clothing libraries, so you can hire something and you don't actually own it, so you hire it and then you give it back. I think that's a very successful method. Also, even like in the food industry, there was like a project was set up by Jamie Oliver where they take the food that is not perfect and they sell it to you. And I get that box scheme, comes to my house every fortnight, costs me £12. Thank you very much. And, for me, I think, well, that's one way, and we just have to consistently think of these new ways, because if there is problems with, for example, like you were saying, cosmetics companies, I mean, this is not just waste, this is very costly. And what we have to do is perhaps change our margin of how we look at, like, if a buyer is saying, okay, well, this has to be 100% perfect, maybe the buyer should be able to have some wriggle room in their rules, which are set down from the top down, that they are allowed to have 10% margin of error, and maybe that 10% margin of error could then be passed on to the consumer with a discount, and maybe that would be a way. There's always ways of thinking. It's just like new ways of thinking and embracing and actually giving new opportunities for new industries to evolve, actually, which is creates jobs and stops landfill. And I think there's lots of ways of thinking differently, and I think that's one of the main things. So for me, we've created this whole thing called Fashion Act Now, and I think it's not just fashion needs to act now, we all need to act now, and I think that's the message, really. Act now.
Patrick Speck from Grower, the future of bathroom design, and where is it going now? What are consumers? What are your customers? Not a big fan of the word consumer, to be fair, but customers and citizens and people who buy your products. What are they asking from you? And also, perhaps if you could talk just a little bit about the water project that you guys are working on as well, which I was interested to hear about.
I think. As one point that is very important is to understand the demand, right? So the consumers are kind of already expecting something more from you and from the manufacturers. I think the awareness and they are kind of understanding more about this. So we do create interfaces. So we are kind of we create an interface with water, right? Basically, so you access. So we bring access to water to people in this case. And again, this is like a scarce resource, right? And talking about that, and I think the expectations are getting a lot into the performance in the product, but at the same time, we need to bring something as an answer. How can we utilize through our products ways that can make people save some of that water, right? So and I think this is it's something that we are doing. We're putting in our products example. So there's what we call it as an eco joy, is the eco enjoyment. That's one of our technologies that we managed to reduce 50% of water in a head shower. So again, imagine how the impact that is for example, if we're talking about hospitality, about a hotel, so it helps a lot into it. But in the end of the day, you are not sacrificing performance, because this is also something the consumers are, there's also that discussion. So it's ecological, but if I'm having to pay an extra on it, or if it's kind of a compromising my performance, I'm going to think twice about buying that, right? So that pushes also the pressure on us that we need to deliver something that really is going to be equal or even better than let's say the current status that we have today. So I see also, as I mentioned before, something that comes towards the future. I think what I was mentioning regarding the 3D printing. So the 3D printing also, I believe that we can kind of we are still scratching the surface into it. But again, is just is an unbelievable technology that I think allows you, first of all, you imagine that instead of shipping a product, you can be shipping a file, right? And you can be printing, you can decentralize production. So again, you can use less resources, would be kind of a less material. I think this is it's something that we are working on at the moment. We want to expand this in terms of new products, and I believe that creating products with a least amount of resources, and at the same time, I think the water-saving features also is a way forward. It's definitely a way to go ahead into it.
Thank you, Patrick. That's fascinating stuff. I mean, very conscious of time, guys, and I am going to put you all on the spot here. I hope you don't mind. But I think we're planted an event that's set up hopefully to inspire people that there are solutions to the climate emergency and also to biodiversity and habitat destruction, part of which the waste issue absolutely contributes to. So I think something that has come out of this, definitely one thing is that there is a responsibility on all of us to think about this and to demand change across from a political level down to all the choices that we make of where we put our money each day. But if I may just ask each of you, if you were to have just one piece of advice, just one practical piece of advice that everyone in the audience could take away today in order to just very simply reduce the amount of waste that comes out of their home on a daily basis? And I'm going to start with you, Andy Flynn.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, it's a pretty obvious one, and it comes back to the kind of founding principle of why we founded Potter Pots, and it comes down to taking a holistic view to sustainability. So it's thinking about the materials that we're using, but also the end-to-end journey of a product. For us, that was, as I said, one of the most important insights to kind of lowering the overall carbon footprint. So I guess it's just about thinking about every kind of day-to-day thing that you're doing to, overall lower your impacts on the environment. So,
thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, for my case here is closing the tap, when you brushing the teeth, like a small act. The same thing as again taking a shower. So you're rinsing your hair, or you're putting shampoo. It's easy for you to kind of close the tap. Just do that saving. And again, you want to go out, kind of take a takeaway bottle with you. This is what I do. And again, we have a brilliant product for that as well. That's our Grow Blue. That's the best water. Is the one water that's coming directly from your tap. So we just created a beautiful product that again delivers kind of a filtered, chilled, and sparkling water and still water out of the tap. So again, if you kind of bring with you a flask, it's it's another way that stop kind of buying plastic mineral bottles. That is it's going to help also in terms of the future.
Thank you, Patrick. Sarah Ratty.
Thank you. Well, a few things, but one that I always think of, and I know we all are guilty of it, when you walk around your house and you see how many plugs are left on, how many sockets, and you go into a hotel room, oh, that one's been left on. You're on the train, oh, that one's been left on. What if we all just went around and just switched them off? That would make a huge difference and save a lot of energy, which I think would be amazing. That's just a very small, tiny thing we could all do. The guppy bag, which I spoke about earlier, that's going to reduce microplastics in the ocean. It's a company called Guppy Friend. You can get them online. They're really great. I think that's really important. And, there's one other really great thing that I've noticed recently. Oh, sorry, one. This one's really good. The Co-op are now recycling soft plastics. So you can now take your soft plastics to the Co-op. Yay. Big up the Co-op.
That's a good finish.
I'm not sponsored.
Thank you, Sarah. Nick?
Don't ask what happens to those plastics from
dear.
the Co-op. Or to those Walker crisp packets, because I know exactly where they are too. So essentially, in the waste business, which is I'm in, so keep chucking it at me. No, think of where your products come from, and then consider if you can buy it locally. It might be slightly different, might be slightly more expensive, but that will change the world. Yeah, if you can buy the product locally rather than from the big numbers in all their packaging, because most of your packaging is to enable the product to be moved a long way. Yeah, so that's buy local.
That's a great one, Nick. I think that's a great shout. For me, it's just turn off your car engine when you're parked. Stop idling. That's another just completely wasteful habit, which I see all the time, and it drives me mad. But super easy. If you are driving a car, get on the bike or walk instead. But if you have to be in your car, turn off the engine whenever you possibly can. But guys, I'm so grateful that you've all been here sitting to listen to what we've been talking about. I'm incredibly grateful to all the panellists who've been part of this Age of Waste talk. Nick Stillwell from Stormboard, Sarah Ratty from Seal Fashion, and Patrick Speck from Grower, and Andy Flynn here at short notice, but I think absolutely worthy of a place on the panel from Potter Pots. I think it's been a hugely informative talk. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I would just encourage you so much to go and enjoy the rest of the Planted event. Check us out at www.planted-cities.co.uk. It's free to register the event. As I've described, we've got our Sleeping in Nature installation over there, and Natural Living section over there. The Green Grads in the Sampson building. There's some amazing designers from the lost generation of graduates, and also our Botanical Market and the Green Rooms Market over in the back, where you'll absolutely find Andy Flynn and Potter Pots. So, guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you again to our panellists. I've been Sam Peters, and this is Planted Unearthed.